welcome to week 5 of Lit 4121, Anthology of Heroes and Villains. We are in our penultimate week, which means we have 2 weeks to go. This week is going to be a little different in some of the textual reading and especially in the assignment. The assignment often freaks out people, but I don't want you to worry too much about it, but we'll get there in a second. First of all, the heroes and villains. Obviously, you're going to want to go to the final chapter, conclusion, where he's wrapping up a bunch of his ideas about what this means and what he's talking about here, especially an example from the classic Casablanca. What he's talking about is the aspects of a character that makes us interested in what it is that we follow and why we are interested in heroes and villains. Kind of summing up all the ideas he's putting forth. One of the things he especially talking about is how these characters are often we allow bad things happen to them, or we expect something tragic or terrible to have been involved in their lives to show that they can overcome them or be broken by them, to take these real life issues, these dramas that we all go through on the big stage. And so he is talking about all these different examples of how we see people push to the absolute limit and how they respond to it being the way that it defines those characters. That being pushed to the edge is what we often want from heroes. And it's often how we consider the sophistication of a heroic story. I mean, if you think about it, we've had heroes our entire lives. We have little kid stories about people who never really have any trouble. They might have some small issues ahead of them, but they're going to win. There's not going to be a problem with that. To people who are sometimes the architects of their own dangers, their own issues, just as with Jessica Jones, or people who may actually be villains most of the time, such as the characters in The Steen, but then are being heroic this time. We see over and over again the more complex questions we ask more about the morality, the ethics, and what these people have to go through to be who they are matters a great deal. And that's one of the things he's talking about in this chapter. Also, the crash course video is about this character, Rama. I wanted to make sure we saw at least one of the other non-European versions of these stories. We did also have some of the trickster stories from Africa, but the point is that cultures throughout the world have always had these kinds of stories as well. And Rama, as well as the Ramayana and all of these stories, are older than any European civilization we know about. And there are several texts in Asia that are the same way, and of course many of the oral stories from Africa and from Native Americans are also ancient. The reason I do that is because we quite often see, because of where we are and growing up in the United States, are often influenced heavily by American and European views of the heroic story. And if you listen to the crash course video, and if you read any of the supplemental readings here about the legends of Rama, you're going to see that they kind of go all over the place. They don't necessarily follow the kind of narrative we wish they would. And sometimes they seem almost completely nonsensical. You may have seen some of this when we were talking about Gilgamesh as well. Some of the things that those cultures and those people who told those stories care about are not what we care about. And some of the things that they want to see in heroes or in villains are not exactly things we would want to see. I mean, Gilgamesh was not a good king, but was that because he was misusing his power, or is it because he didn't care about the people he was ruling over, even though he was still a tyrant after he went through his experiences? These are really interesting questions, and people don't necessarily don't want to answer them all the same way. Several of the choices Rama makes in his story are not choices that we would necessarily agree with, but he is seen as a hero and somebody to idolize and use as an example of various virtues. The other interesting thing about Rama is part of his story, if you go through it all is he's been exiled and he has to struggle back and forth about who he is and what he's going to be. Um, and those kinds of questions, when you are pushed to that limit, again, who are you going to be, is answered in yet another way with Rama. Also, of course, you're going to watch an episode of Person of Interest. This is the opening episode. And the thing about Person of Interest is that the first episode is necessarily, it kind of establishes the premise, but it's also a little bit deceptive. So, first episodes are interesting, just as all beginnings of stories are, and I hope you choose to follow some of these stories as you go after the class is over, because things like Jessica Jones and A Person of Interest are fascinating stories that I think are well worth your attention. But Person of Interest sets up a story about these two characters, especially Harold Finch and John Reese. And those two are kind of a split up of a character we've seen over and over again, which we may more often see in a character like Batman. Several people who are fans of the show will refer to John Reese as plainclothes Batman. And the idea is it's somebody who has the natural talents and the skills to be incredible at almost everything they do. In this case, it's these two have split those skills between them. And they seek out to do good things for no other reason than they want to do good. And then, of course, in their case, they feel that they have done plenty of wrong that they need to make up for. This is a character we see a lot of. We see this in many heroic stories. We see this in many movies. It can be as big a deal as the soldier who needs to make up for what he went through in war, or the assassin who finally decides he can't kill anymore, or whatever the story is. I mean, again, in Jessica Jones, as in a previous example, there's somebody who feels that her brief effort at heroism failed so badly, she's always going to be guilty about it. And so this is that kind of character again. It also goes with kind of a crime procedural, somebody who has a bit of special knowledge, going out of their way to save the day. And you'll notice very quickly that the way this show gets established is it is possible for people on their own with good intent and a little bit of extra help, in their case from the machine, to be able to find their way to saving people. And that is a really compelling story. And we tell over and over and over again, and we have forever. So that's one of the reasons I want to give this to you. It's a relatively recent story. Another reason I want to give it to you is if you watch this show, keep watching it, you'll see it also delves into a lot of issues that are hard to navigate today, such as a security culture. What happens if we have machines helping us make decisions? And how do we navigate our way through ethics and morality of that kind of world? You know, who decides what is right, who decides what is wrong, and how do we respond? All right. So the actual assignments, of course, obviously another discussion forum. Um, and I want to repeat that I'm very encouraged by the quality and depth of the discussion you guys are having. Just keep that up. Some of you, I have noticed, get a little late with the initial post. If you're going to be a little late with the initial post, try to make certain that you are also responding to plenty of other people's posts so that you don't lose out on too many points. And the assignment that is going to cause you a lot of issues, or often gets a lot of feedback, is the applied myth. And basically, what I'm wanting you to do is tell me a story. You can use an epic poem, you can write a short story, you can try to tell in a scene-song fairy tale way. I don't know, if you are ambitious, you can even try to record a video or audio track of somebody telling a story. What it is, I want you to show what you understand about the heroes and villains and the mythology behind them. And can you tell a story? Now, it's only going to be about 800, 1200 words long because we don't have time this week to necessarily let you develop an entirely full, thoughtful short story. And of course, most of you are not training for that sort of thing, so that would cause you more anxiety. So I just want you to tell me part of it, a great introduction, the quick fairy tale story. I mean, think about the way Mike Rugnetta told the story of Anansi or Rama or Enkidu or any of these. Can you quickly summarize a story? Can you talk about things? Can you draw the big patterns which inform the mythology to help us see what's going on here? All I want you to do is kind of make it up on your own, or take an existing hero and put them there in their own story for you, and show me the moral and ethical concepts. Show me some of the steps of the heroic journey. Show me some of the things that you now understand about this mythology. That's all I'm looking for. It is worth a fair number of points, but it's also something I'm not going to be too harsh when I'm grading it. I know this is outside of most people's comfort zone, but I just want you to demonstrate what you can do. All right. This is a pretty quick week. Also, while you're working this week, I want you to keep thinking about what's going to come next week. Make certain you're thinking about the research paper. If you are still not certain what that's going to be, the week 6 is up and you can look at the assignment and work on that a little bit as well. Make certain you have several sources. Several of you have talked about you're going to get other sources in your research proposals. And some of you mentioned that you want to do a story, either the book or movie version, and yet that story's been adapted. And I highly encourage you to look at the adaptation. For example, if you want to do a Harry Potter, not only look at the movie or the book, but look at the other version as well and see if you can get some information, can learn some things about it. Don't forget to cite the source text. So if you're reading, say, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, cite Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as your primary text, that sort of thing. And make sure you have 4 sources. I would highly urge you to try to find sources that don't necessarily talk about the book or the movie itself, but about issues in it. So, for example, if you want to talk about Harry Potter, talk about the story of the magical child and why that's a common story. See if you can find information about that. All right, I think that's the main high points. If you have any questions, as always, shoot me an email or ask me online. Although shooting me an email is probably going to get you a response more quickly. And I will talk to you later. Bye.